Most JavaScript developers think they understand JavaScript until something breaks in production and suddenly nothing makes sense. A variable behaves weird, a function gives unexpected output, async code runs out of order, and you're stuck wondering what's going on. The problem is not your coding skills. The problem is you never really understood how JavaScript works internally. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through the most important JavaScript concepts, and more importantly, connect them so everything actually makes sense. Let's start with number 1, functions, because this is where everything begins. Now on your screen, you see a function called add. It takes two inputs, A and B. Inside the function, it adds those two values and returns the result. Then below that, you see the function being called with values 2 and 3. So A becomes 2, B becomes 3, and the function returns 5. So what's happening step by step is, input goes in, logic runs, output comes out. This may look simple, but this is exactly how most real-world systems work. Whether it's calculating totals, transforming API data, or handling user actions, everything is just functions working together. So understanding functions is not optional, it's fundamental. Now let's move to number 2, variables. But this time, let's understand how to actually use them properly. In modern JavaScript, you mainly use const and let. If you see this on the screen, here, you are creating a variable a and assigning it the value 10. Because it's declared using const, JavaScript will not allow you to reassign it later. So when you try to change it to 20, it throws an error. Now look at this. Here, the variable is declared using let, so reassignment is allowed. The value starts at 10 and then updates to 20. Now let's move to number 3, data types. On your screen, you see different variables storing different kinds of values. Each variable holds a different type of data: number, string, boolean, object, array, and function. Now here's the important part. JavaScript is dynamically typed. Here, x starts as a number and then becomes a string. JavaScript allows this flexibility, but it also means you need to be careful because type mistakes won't always throw errors immediately. Now let's move to number 4, truthy and falsy values. If you look at this example, you see conditions using different values. In the first case, 0 behaves like false, so the code inside does not run. In the second case, a non-empty string behaves like true, so the code runs. So JavaScript is not always checking for true or false. It converts values into truthy or falsy behind the scenes. And this is why sometimes your conditions don't behave the way you expect. Now let's go to number 5, scope. Take a look at this. You see a function with a variable defined inside an if block. Even though A is inside the block, it is still accessible inside the entire function. That's because var is function scoped. Now look at the same example using let. Now A is only available inside the block, and accessing it outside causes an error. So scope determines where your variables live, and understanding this helps you avoid unexpected behavior. Now number 6, hoisting. In this example, even though x is used before it is defined, JavaScript does not throw an error. Instead, it prints undefined. That's because internally, JavaScript does this. It moves the declaration to the top, but not the assignment. So JavaScript knows x exists, but it doesn't know its value yet. That's why you get undefined. So remember, JavaScript hoists declarations, not assignments. Now let's move to number 7, the this keyword. On your screen, you see an object with a method. Here, this.age refers to the age property of the person object, because the function is being called by person. Now look at this. Here, the function is called independently, not by person. So this no longer refers to the object, and the result becomes undefined. So the key idea is, this depends on how the function is called. Now number 8, arrow functions. If you look at this example, you see two functions inside an object. When you call normalfunc, this refers to the object, so it prints 25. But when you call arrowfunc, it does not print 25. That's because arrow functions do not have their own this. They take this from the surrounding context, which is outside the object. So even though both functions look similar, they behave differently. Now let's move to number 9, prototypes. On your screen, you see two objects created, one created from another. When you call dog.move, JavaScript first checks if move exists in dog. It doesn't, so it looks at the object it was created from, animal. There it finds the method and executes it. This process is called the prototype chain. Now number 10, asynchronous JavaScript. Notice what's happening here. JavaScript first prints start. Then it schedules the delayed function to run after 1 second. But it does not wait. It continues and prints end. After 1 second, it finally runs the delayed function and prints hello after delay. So the output becomes start to end to hello. This is because JavaScript does not block execution. Now finally, let's connect everything clearly. When you create variables, their behavior depends on scope and hoisting. When you work with functions, issues usually come from this or closures. When you work with objects, behavior sharing happens through prototypes. And when things feel out of order, it's usually because of asynchronous execution. So instead of debugging randomly, you start thinking in layers. Is this a scope issue? Is this a this issue? Is this async timing? And once you start thinking like that, JavaScript stops feeling confusing and starts making sense. If you're serious about becoming a strong developer, don't just learn syntax. Understand how things actually work together, because that's what separates someone who just writes code from someone who truly understands it.